Give us free. Give us free.
Your Honor, please instruct the defendant, but he cannot disrupt these proceedings with such outbursts.
Give us free.
If we are to have any semblance of order in this country,
Give us free.
Peace, unity, and welcome my conscious and unconscious family and friends. This is the all-new Black Village Community Podcast, and I am truly your host of the show, JC, aka Afro Black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut, without any fear, as I use my mic as a spear to chucker you with liberated truth. I am your host and your native soldier in the struggle. My purpose and mission for this show is first to enlighten, inform, and engage. And I want to engage with all who claim to know the truth. All truth seekers and my native family, I welcome you. This show is dedicated to all our indigenous native ancestors and to all those who've carried the mantle of truth, and to every person with the ability to throw off the chains of comfortable habit and unwarranted assumption and move in a new, liberated direction that is guided by truth and observational evidence, no matter where that direction may lead you. My main objective and purpose here is freedom, mind, soul, and spirit. That being said, welcome to the Black Village Community Podcast, and much love from our great universal goddess and mother of all, living here and above.
AC in the house.
The Matrix. Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. A prison. For your mind, for your mind, for your mind.
Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people. Aboriginal means the original inhabitant of a land from the earliest times. The ancient mound builders that built and designed the pyramids right here, not just by the Nile, contrary to popular belief and denial. Pyramids and huge hieroglyphics and pictographs on the ground are all mounds found around the Americas, north, central, and south, even Venus and Mars. That is documented fact that emanates from my mouth. So who exactly were these aboriginals here, whose ancient evidence of residency is hesitantly mentioned in this hemisphere? Were they the stereotypical Native American so-called Red Indians? Well then, let's be clear, ask any of their tribes if they're sincere. They'll tell ya, those mounds predate their origins. Our past was erased and replaced with lies. Our achievements and identity plagiarized. We got amnesia of who we are, but we go way back further than the seats in your car. Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people.
This is how we ride and roll. Soldier for life for sure.
Hey, this is JC, aka Afro Black, and I am here with you for another delicious Black Sunday to drop nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. And I am here today for another delicious Black Sunday to drop nothing but, things that I love to share with my conscious community, things that I have to share due to the fact of who I am, being the fact that I am an indigenous Native American. I am an indigenous original, the child of. It just makes me feel good to know who I am. And you know what? And due to the fact that it makes me feel good to know who I am, I have to share with my, not only the conscious community, I'm really reaching out to those who are unconscious of who they are, due to the fact of the lies that we've been born into. So let me get down to the nitty gritty of what today's podcast is about. Today is a continuation of last week's podcast subject matter, which is that title, Amerindian Traditions and its Cultural Connection to the Negro Slave, Part 3. Again, that is Amerindian Traditions and its Cultural Connection to the Negro Slave, Part 3. And so let me roll back a little bit. Let me play something that's more that we can vibe to, something we can vibrate to here on the Black Village Community. Let me here. There you go. Some J-Bach. You feel me? You can leave some J-Bach in the backdrop. And so I'm going to continue this subject matter from last week because I didn't get it. There was a lot of things I didn't get a chance to share with the conscious community. I want to elaborate more on the corn husk doll tradition of our people and tie some ends and connect some pieces on that level. And I also, apart from the corn husk doll making, there's another subject matter I really want to share with the conscious community, and that's the term black. There's a lot of fellow conscious comrades of mine out there. When I say conscious comrades, I mean my indigenous comrades out there who don't agree with me using the terminology black. And I totally comprehend why, and I even agree to some of the aspects of why. But I want to share why I call my podcast the Black Village, and so I want to talk about that. And today my queen is not here with me, so I'm a lone ranger in the village room right now. But it's all gravy because I'm not by myself, because I know I got my listeners vibing with me. I got my brothers and sisters. I'm hoping some of them chime in and join me here, so I can vibrate with them and we can vibrate together on this subject matter. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the term black. But first I'm going to deal with the corn husk doll making. That many black slaves. Now, I'm using the term black because our people, even though our people were really indigenous Native Americans on those plantations, and yet they posed to us through lying movies like Roots and 12 Years a Slave, and they're constantly perpetuating the lie term African American, which is a new modern label, term, and construct that they've given to us, constantly changing and reclassifying who we are as a people, not allowing us to identify ourselves, playing on the fact that a lot of black people don't even know who they are, due to the fact of between the 1950s and the 1960s and early 70s, our grandparents and our parents did not pass along the tradition of who we were and are as a people. And so there are many black Native Americans or indigenous Native Americans who did pass those traditions along to their children. I want to talk about that as well. But there was many hundreds and thousands of us where our grandparents and our parents did not pass those traditions to us like they should have. And there's reasons, there's a lot of reasons and assumptions that I can come to or I can bring up, on why. I can talk about why, even though my grandmother shared who she was as a Cherokee with my mother. So my mother knew who she was. My mother always knew that she was indigenous Native American, and that not only through her mother, which is my grandmother, but also through my grandfather, who was also my grandfather, which is my mother's father, who was also full-blood Choctaw Native American as well, or indigenous Native American as well. So I was actually blessed in that area, but even though I was blessed with knowing who I am, okay, and as I grew older, my mother did not keep that before me and my sisters. In other words, she did not constantly talk to us about our heritage and our identity. So me growing up in South Central Los Angeles, and my mother also growing up in South Central Los Angeles, which is a very hard area to grow up in, a hard neighborhood to grow up in, where I grew up at, which is I kind of grew up, I grew up in the Jordan Projects to where I last lived before I moved to where I am now, which was lived in the Manchester and Hoover, and those gang infested areas. And my mother, being a single mother, she didn't keep the oral tradition of our heritage. She didn't keep it with us and share it with me and my sisters. So as I grew up, it was basically the school system and the media told me who I was, which wasn't who I was. I was told that I was, an Afro-American, from an Afro-American to an African-American. And so, but as I got older and I sought to know, I sought out to know, and then I was reinformed by my mother and aunties and, my grandmother, and of who I am, that I am of the descent. I'm a child and a descendant of the Cherokee and Choctaw people. So I am an indigenous Black American. I'm an indigenous American. Now I'll use the term Black. Well, before I was going to go into the term Black, I want to really focus on the corn husk doll making. So I will get back to the term Black. I will get back into tying myself into it and talking about the definition of Black America. I will get into that. But let me go into the corn husk doll making, which I really, really want to talk about, which is a continuation from last week's show that I want to focus on, because that's also a cultural trait of our ancestors. That's not only a cultural trait that was on the plantation, it was a tradition amongst our ancient ancestors that they practiced, that the women passed on to the children, and for hundreds of thousands of years. So I want to talk about that right now, but also I want to share that if anybody want to join me here in the Black Village, here at the table of the table of truth. If you want to join me here at the conscious table of truth, you can chime in. Won't cost you a dime, just a minute of your conscious time. You can chime in at 8445-9340. Excuse me. You can chime in at 855-445-4093. And you can also chime in at 857-232-0155. And don't forget the conference key to get through the conference door, which is 947595. So please chime in. You can join me here, and you can verberate and bring your perspective to the table. So I want to share some information from a book titled Making the Dream Work: A History of Doll Making During Slavery. And I'm going to drop down to a paragraph on page 19. Again, this is from a book titled Making the Dream Work: A History of Doll Making During Slavery. So I'm on page 19, and I'm going to read this paragraph that I think is very important to share. It goes like this. Native Indian doll making was a normality and tradition among Native American Indian females. And these dolls were traditionally made from the husk of corn. This traditional trait is also seen in the biographical movie and true story 12 Years a Slave, as the slave girl Patsy made corn husk dolls to pass the time from a day's hard work on the plantation. So that's taken from a book called Making the Dreams Work, Making the American Dream Work: A History of Doll Making During Slavery. All right, that was on page 19. Let me go down to another. This is taken from the Smithsonian, okay? Native American Doll Lesson Plan, the Smithsonian Education Institute, where I got this information from, okay? And it goes like this, under corn husk dolls. American colonists learned to grow corn from the Indians and depended on corn as one of their basic food staples during the 16 and 1700s. The Indians also taught these early settlers how to make corn husk dolls. The dolls could be made could be made with corn husk clothing as a real fabric scraps and real fabric scrapes. Excuse me. Plus, other decorative ornaments could be added to the corn husk doll to make it as beautiful as any little girl wanted. Native Americans did not waste any part of the corn. Corn stalks were used for poles to support crops or as walking sticks, kindling for fires. Corn cobs were used to make pipes and soaked in fat and used for fire starters. Corn husk were also used to weave mats and make dolls. Corn silk was used for healing teas. The general idea that a doll would be a lasting toy is not a belief of many Indian tribes. Even a very beautiful decorative corn husk doll would be expected to fall apart. A corn husk doll, like many playthings, would naturally disintegrate over time, and as the child grew older, he or she would no longer need the toy anyway. Oh, sorry. So that's from the Smithsonian. But the important part of the article is the fact that corn husk dolls, you got a lot. If you go, if you actually Google corn husk doll, you'll find many websites and web links linked to areas where white folks are talking about how to make corn husk dolls. They don't really get into the history of it. I noticed when I was doing my research, they don't really get into the true history and the tradition of Native American or indigenous Native American corn husk doll making. They more or less talk about how to do it, and they mention that it was something that the Native Americans did. I mean, I saw one website where they talked about, the Irish did it and Europeans did it, but they don't tell you that this was something that was foreign to Europeans prior to coming to North America. So it was actually a tradition that originates with the indigenous people of North America. So let me go on down. I got some other information right here I want to read as well, coming from this is coming from corn husk dolls and play amidst oppression. This is from a site called the Book and the Rod, wordpress.com. Okay, and so this is about corn husk doll. Check this out. It says aside from demonstrating an important side of Patsy's character. Now this is making reference to the movie 12 Years a Slave. This article right here is making reference to the movie 12 Years a Slave to talk about corn husk doll making. Aside from demonstrating an important side of Patsy's character, corn husk dolls also call into play another aspect of American slavery, the connection to Native Americans. In the film, Northrop and his peers encounter a group of Native Americans in the woods, reminding the audience of the precarious social position of both groups in the mid-1800s. Throughout U.S. history, Native Americans were both victims and perpetrators of chattel slavery. Native Americans fashioned corn husk dolls for countless generations before Europeans arrived. Eventually, the continued interaction between Europeans, Africans, and Native Americans led to the craft's adoptions amongst children of the colonial settlers and enslaved people. Now, where I differ with this article at is this. As I've said before, slavery or Africans were not introduced to North America until 1626. Okay? Prior to 1626, meaning going all the way back to 1625, 1624, 1620, 1618, and all the way back, all the way until when Europeans first set foot on North America, which was in the 1500s. Native Americans was already here. Our people were already here, had their own system of doing everything. And so corn husk doll making was already here. Okay? The people who they constantly are calling African Americans are not African Americans. They are actually indigenous Indian Americans. That's who we are. And so when it comes to the first Africans who came here, only 20 of them, they only brought 20 African slaves in 1626. Not 100, not 200, not 300. Only 20 got off the ship. And from my understanding, only 17 actually got off. 20 came, only 17 actually got off the ship in Jamestown, Virginia. So how can you take 17 African slaves and breed them into millions of already indigenous Native Americans on plantations and then call them Africans? That don't make sense. And so hundreds of thousands of Africans did not come here until around between the late 18th and 19th century is when they started bringing more and more Africans here. But again, as I will continue to tell people, there is no number of 1 million Africans that ever set foot on North America as slaves. The number to date, the new number, the actual number that anybody you can go find yourself is at 304,000 Africans that came to North America. And even at that number right now, that number of 304,000 Africans cannot turn millions of native people, indigenous Native Americans into Africans. That's an impossibility. Every child that was born from the encounter of an African and an indigenous woman makes that child the child of an indigenous woman. That's how it goes. That's how it's played, people. Our people were a matrinal people. Even the Africans were matrinal. Our indigenous Native American ancestors were a matrinal people. So every child that was born to a Native American woman makes that child indigenous Native American. Makes that child an indigenous American. But yet we're being told the opposite. Yet we're being taught the opposite by a corrupt, lying, manipulative system. So let me continue from what I was reading at. And again, Native Americans fashioned corn husk dolls for countless generations before Europeans arrived. Eventually, the continued interaction between Europeans, Africans, and Native Americans led to the craft's adoption among children of colonial settlers and enslaved people. On plantations where corn was grown, it would not have been uncommon for slaves to use the husks for dolls or hats. When and where did Patsy learn to make corn husk dolls? According to Northrop, she glories in the fact that she is the offspring of a Guyana nigger brought over to Cuba in a slave ship. One of the astounding facts of American slavery is the daughter of an African woman who was traded in Cuba learns the craft mastered by Native Americans. Now, she says she learned it from her mother, who was on the island of Cuba. Now, I want everybody to know during these periods of time, during the early 18th, 19th, 17th century, even on actually from the very beginnings of slavery in North America, all that area, Cuba, the West Indies, actually it was called the West Indies. It was all called the West Indies. Cuba, the Haitian Islands, all that out, the Dominican Republic, all those Dominican islands were all called the West Indies. And so this is the reason why when you read about Native American slavery and you hear about the wars and you read about the wars that our ancestors had with the white man, you hear about the white man saying that he sent, 30,000 or 20,000 indigenous Americans to the West Indies as slaves. And I want you to know that a lot of those brothers and sisters who were sent to the West Indies as slaves ended right back over here in North America. Because also you'll read where they claimed where Carolina or Virginia got African slaves from the West Indies. Well, those were not Africans. Those were indigenous Americans who had lost their identity due to chattel slavery. So we have to decipher through the mess of lies that white devils continue to tell, even in books. So you have to learn to read for yourself, comprehend for yourself. Do not allow the system to tell you the interpretation of something. Okay, so let me continue this reading right quick. It says, on the plantation where corn was grown, it would not have been uncommon for slaves to use the husk for dolls or hats. When and where did Patsy learn to make corn husk dolls? According to Northrop, she gloried in the fact that she is the offspring of a Guyana nigger brought over to Cuba in a slave ship. One of the outstanding facets of American slavery is that the daughter of an African woman who was traded in Cuba learns the crafts mastered by Native Americans and practice it in rural Louisiana. Patsy's life does not exist in a vacuum. Her sitting in the field making those dolls is the product of continued centuries of cultural interaction amidst duplicious and land deals and genocide. Her dolls symbolize the unique American nature of the brand of slavery that condemned her to the Epps plantation. Now, reading this whole paragraph, which I just read, which was a couple paragraphs, still brings into mind the fact that they tried to penetrate still some covert lie. The lie is this: claiming that she came from she's the product of an African mother from Cuba or from Guyana, as they want to call it. Okay? That, knowing the fact that the whole point of chattel slavery was to erase one's identity. Okay? So if the whole point of slavery, especially in the West Indies, the West Indies was supposed to be even more harsher than North America. And this was the whole purpose of sending a lot of our Native American brothers and sisters, our indigenous Native American ancestors, to the West Indies, especially the warriors, who they know the warriors would not give up a fight. They would die. They would fight to the death. And so that was the whole reason why they sent 20,000, 30,000 after a war. They would send them to the West Indies because West Indies was more harsh. Matter of fact, when you talk about the West Indies, the Willie Lynch letters, the guy who supposedly had came up with the process and the system of chattel slavery, which through the Willie Lynch letters, this guy's plantation was in the West Indies. They had to, a lot of people died. A lot of brothers and sisters did not make it through the slave system on the plantations in the West Indies because it was just that harsh. And so a part of that harsh chattel system was to remove your identity, to remove your culture, to remove your name, your language away from you, to give you a new language, give you a new name, give you a new identity. And so, again, Patsy did not learn a Native American tradition by mishaps. Because when reading this paragraph, saying that her mother was a Guyana nigger brought over to Cuba, trying to insinuate she came from Africa. But they don't talk about the interaction that her mother had with the indigenous population, where she got this trade from of learning how to make dolls out of corn husks, which she taught her daughter Patsy. That part of the picture is missing. Why? Because her mother was a Native American. Her mother was not an African from Africa. You have to be able to decipher through the lies that these coon, monkey, Negro, house Negroes who are nothing but demons for the white devil, imps for the white devil, perpetrating and continuing the system of manipulating our people and manipulating us as a people. Oprah Winfrey is a part of that system. A lot of these Hollywood Negroes are a part of the system of continuing the lie, the manipulative, assimilated lie of telling us who we are. And that's because the Hollywood, most of the Hollywood house Negroes have sold their soul for green cotton. They'll do anything for green cotton. Kill their mama, sell their sister, kill their brother. They don't give a damn. So we have to wake up to the truth, people. So let me continue on down as I continue. Another one called The Legend of the Cornhusk Doll. I found this article very interesting right here. It's called The Legend of Cornhusk Dolls. Let me read this here. It goes, according to the Iroquois legend, the Iroquois people had 3 sisters. Corn, bean, and squash are the sustainers of life. The corn spirit wanted to do something extra for her people. So the creator allowed her to create a beautiful doll from her husk, which was to roam the earth and bring brotherhood, and in that aspect, sisterhood, and contentment to the Iroquois nation. The doll went from village to village playing with the children. Now this story right here is a story that many, and they have many different aspects to the story. Some a little bit changed here, a little bit there, but they, for the most part, they stick to the storyline, of the 3 sisters, and that the creator told the 3 sisters, and woo woo. Okay, but this is a legendary story that many of our ancestral tribes told the children about how Cornhusk Doll came into existence, how the Cornhusk Doll making became a traditional, customary thing that they did within the nation, within the tribes. And so, you know what? Before I don't want to go too deep off into that, because I got an audio cast that's going to basically read this story, and I will play that in a little bit. But let me read this right here. This is from a book, and you guys, I promote this book. You've heard me promote this book in the past. Lies My Teacher Told Me by Dr. James Lowen. And this is how our indigenous ancestors lost it all. The question is, and that's the question, how did our ancestors lose everything? How did our people lose their identity? How did our people lose, how did our native ancestors, our indigenous ancestors lose the power of their own land, power over their own land? I mean, there's many aspects, many stories, many histories coming from different perspectives on how this happened. And I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of truth in everything that's being said when it comes to how it happened. But I think James Lowen gives a pretty good perspective on it. And this is what he says in his book called Lies My Teacher Told Me. Thus, what worked for the Native American, in short, worked. Let me say this again. Thus, what worked for the Native Americans in the short run worked against them in the long run. It was Indians who were enslaved, Indians who died, Indian technology that was lost, Indian culture that fell apart. By the time the pitiful remnant of the Massachusetts tribes converted to Christianity and joined the Puritans praying Indian towns, they did so in response to an invading culture that told them their religion was wrong and Christianity was right. This process exemplifies what anthropologists call cultural imperialism. Even the proud Plains Indians, whose centric culture combined horses and guns from the Spanish with natives and religion, hunting styles showed the effects of cultural imperialism. The Sioux word for white man, Wasichu, meant one who has everything good. Wow. So basically, he's showing in short how the persistence of the white man And this is what the white man, the white man has not changed. He has not changed from this aspect. He believes that, what you continually tell a person over and over and over and over, just keep telling a person just keep repeating the same thing, eventually they'll accept it. They believe this and they do this. They do this to their own people. And what do they keep constantly telling us over and over and over again? That we are African American, Afro-American, African American, Afro-American. Oh no, you're Black American. So on that note, I got an audio cast that I want to play, and I said I'm going to play this audio cast in reference to the legend of the corn husk doll making. Let me read a little bit of the story before I play this audio cast. But as I said, it goes like this. According to the Iroquois legend, the Iroquois people had 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash, or the sustainers of life. The corn spirit wanted to do something extra for her people, so the creator allowed her to create a beautiful doll from her husk, which was to roam the earth and bring sisterhood and contentment to the Iroquois nation. The doll went from village to village, playing with the children. Everywhere she went, everyone she would tell her how beautiful she was. Everywhere she went, someone would tell her how beautiful she was. One day, this very, very beautiful doll went into the woods and saw herself in a pool of water. She saw how very, very beautiful she was, and this caused her to become very vain and naughty. The doll's vanity and attitude did not sit well with the people or the creator. The creator warned her that warned her that this was not the right kind of behavior. She paid attention for a little while, as the doll do, but caught sight of herself in a pool of water again, and thought to herself how beautiful indeed she was. So basically, this is a story about vanity. So this is one of those legendary stories that was told to the children, that our ancestors passed down about how the corn husk doll making came into existence. Again, I want to point out that, our people on the plantation made, the straw hats from corn husks, weaved all types of baskets and things from corn husk, and the doll making. These are indigenous American Indian practices that still persist among the mulatto tribes today. I say mulatto tribes because a lot of these so-called light-skinned or white-skinned so-called Indians are mulatto hybrid mixed, European mixed blood Indians, okay? So, and they've basically embodied and stolen our ancestral practices, and in the process have deprived us from it. You feel me? So, you got people out there right now fighting alongside them when it comes to the pipeline in Dakota. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are familiar. Those are you guys who watch the news, hear about, the what's going on with the police out there and shooting rubber bullets at them. At least they getting shot with rubber bullets because our indigenous brothers and sisters who are lost of their identity are being shot with real bullets. But my point being is that they're fighting because of sacred land, which I support that 100% for that the white man not to be contaminating the planet with oil and building on sacred land. But my problem with these mulatto hybrid Indians is that they don't fight for our rights. They don't fight for their fellow brother and sister. They don't fight for us. They don't give a damn about the fact that if we're brothers and sisters and we're a family, why don't they fight the system with us, for us, as a people together? Why don't they feel the pain of over 1,300 black men, unarmed black men who've been shot and killed in the streets by serial killing cops? And you know what? Then we can share their pain as well, because they are also killed by cops and abused and brutalized by police. Even the so-called police on their own reservations, which are full of white cops claiming that they're Native American. We got to learn to come together as a people. That's what I'm talking about. So on that note, I want to play this this story about the corn husk doll, which is a very ancient story. So if any kids got any kids in the room that's listening to the station, if you got any kids in the house, you might want to let them hear this story. This is a story that's being spoken from a native sister who's reading this story. So let me play this story, and then after this story is over, we'll continue, and I want to focus on the term black, my position on the term black, and we shall continue from there.
They were building and repairing their homes. They were working in the gardens. They were hunting and fishing. They were making clothing. They were making tools. She thought to herself, wouldn't it be nice if I could do something to make their work seem easier? And so she took the husk from the corn and she made a doll. She made a doll as tall as I am. And she gave her a beautiful face and the ability to walk around and talk. And then she told Corn Husk Doll, you will have a job. You will have a responsibility. Your job will be to go from village to village, and you will entertain the children. You will make them smile and you will make them laugh, and when the adults hear that laughter, they will remember why they are working so hard. It's for the children, and so their work will seem easier. Oh, what an important responsibility, said Corn Husk Doll. I'll go right away. And so she went to the first village, and when she got there, she sang songs to the children, and she played games with the children, and she told them many, many stories. And the children were so happy. They smiled and they laughed, and the adults heard that laughter. And when they heard that laughter, they remembered why they were working so hard. It was for the children, and so their work seemed easier. When it was time for Corn Husk Doll to go to the next village, all of the people gathered round her, and they all said, Nyawa Goa, thank you very much. And by the way, Corn Husk Doll, did anyone ever tell you that you are very beautiful? And Corn Husk Doll said, oh. And she thought about it as she walked to the next village. On her way, she passed by a stream. She remembered what the people said, and so she stopped and looked at her reflection in the water. And she said, oh, they're right. I am very beautiful. She took the time to admire her reflection and fix her hair. In fact, she stayed there so long that the children in the second village didn't think she was going to come, and so they were sad and they started to cry. Well, the spirit of the corn heard children crying instead of laughing, and so she looked to see what was wrong, and she said, oh, Corn Husk Doll, you forgot your responsibility. Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry, said Corn Husk Doll. This will never happen again. And the spirit of the corn said, it better not, because if it does, I'm going to have to do something about it. And so Corn Husk Doll went to the second village. And when she got there, she sang songs with the children and played games with the children and told them many, many stories. And the children were so happy they smiled and they laughed. And when the adults heard that laughter, they remembered why they were working so hard. It was for the children, and so the work seemed easier. When it was time for Corn Husk Doll to leave, all of the people again gathered round, and they said, Nyawa Goa, thank you very much, Corn Husk Doll. And by the way, did anyone ever tell you that you're very beautiful? Oh, said Corn Husk Doll. She started to walk toward the third village, and she thought about what the people said, and again she passed by yet another stream, and she decided to stop and look at her reflection, and when she did, she said, "I think I'm getting even more beautiful." And so she stayed there a long time, admiring herself and fixing her hair, so long that the children in the third village didn't think she was coming. And so they were sad and started to cry. "Oh, Cornhuskdal, you've done it again," said the spirit of the corn. "You've forgotten your responsibility." "Oh, I'm so sorry. I promise it'll never happen again. I won't forget." "It better not," said the spirit of the corn, "because if it does, I'm going to have to do something about it." Well, Cornhuskdal went to the third village. And when she got there, she sang songs with the children and played games with the children and told them many, many stories. And the children were so happy they smiled and they laughed. And when the adults heard that laughter, they remembered why they were working so hard. It was for the children, and so their work seemed easier. When it was time for Cornhuskdal to leave, all of the people gathered round and they all said, "Nyawa Goa." And by the way, Cornhuskdal, did anyone ever tell you that you're very beautiful? "Oh," said Cornhuskdal. And she started to walk toward the next village when again she passed by a stream. But this time, when she looked at her reflection in the water, she saw nothing. There was no face. Her face was taken away. And so that's why we don't give our Cornhuskdals faces. It's a reminder that yes, you should brush your teeth and comb your hair and wash behind your ears and put on clean clothes and put forth your best appearance. But when you start thinking only about yourself and you forget your responsibility toward others, then that's not good. That's how that story goes.
There you go. That's a legendary story that's been told for many years by our people. And today you have that story still being told, continued on reservations by these modern Native Americans on the reservations today who are continuing our indigenous ancestral tradition of the story of the legendary Cornhuskdal story. And so I thought that's a very, very good story that with a very good meaning behind it, that, you know, that obedience and the purpose of obedience and the purpose behind what she was told to do and why she was told to do it, which made the work for the parents a whole lot easier for them to be reminded of why they worked so hard. And that was her purpose, was to do that, by her playing with the children and teaching the children the songs and talking to the people in the villages. And her job was not to be more concerned about how beautiful she was. And so very, very good story. Okay. So now, before my show is over, let me talk about the term black. As I said before, you know, as I said in the beginning of my show, there's been some brothers that I've talked to, and some of my fellow indigenous brothers who have a problem with the term black. Okay. And I had one brother, I've had one brother tell me I'm not black. I'm not, don't be making me a second class or a third class citizen. And so, I explained to the brother why I use the term black. I know I'm not black. The term black, the black is just a color. Black is not an ethnic race. It's not an ethnic group. It's not an ethnic identity. It's only a color. And that term black have been applied to the indigenous people of North America ever since the first European colonists set foot on North America, starting with the Spanish, who used the term by calling our people negros, which is in English Negro, which means black. That's all the word Negro means. It's a Spanish word that means black. That's what the word Negro means. So when you say Negro, you're saying black. When you say black, you're saying Negro. So I understand that. So I use it by the definition of exactly what it means. I don't use the term black to define my identity. I don't use the term black to define my people's identity, my indigenous people of North America. I don't use the term to define my people. I use the term black as a means to reach out to my people who have lost their identity, who are totally unaware of who they are. I use the term black to specify that the color black is a defined definition of the multi-colors of the indigenous people, which range from dark brown to copper color brown to light brown to very light. We come from different shades of brown, all the way to dark brown to that looks black. So I use the term black as a means to reach out to my people, not as an identifiable term that defines my identity of my ethnic group and race. So, on that note, let me read something that I found very interesting, okay? This is taken from encyclopedia.org. I was just curious about what did the definition mean in dictionaries, or by, what the term Black American, not African American, Black American. And this is what you get, at least from Wikipedia right now. African American, also referred to as Black Americans, or Afro-Americans, are an ethnic group of Americans with total or partial ancestry from any of the black racial groups of Africa. Wrong. Lie. So that's coming from Wikipedia. Now here's another one coming from freedictionary.com. This is what it says. Black Americans, an American whose ancestors were born in Africa. African American, Afro-American, or American, a native or inhabitant of the United States. Now, when you look this definition right here, which is in freedictionary.com, it breaks it up. It says Black American, an American whose ancestors were born in Africa. Okay, total lie, total misleading lie. Okay, then it says African American. Then it says Afro-American. Okay, it also uses the term African American twice. Then it says it takes the end part of the American on Black American and African American. It says American, a native or an inhabitant of the United States. So we are being lied to and manipulated, people. Black people. We are being lied to and manipulated. Okay? And this is why it's really important for those of us who are aware of our identity to use the term indigenous. So I totally agree and embrace the fact that the truth of the matter, okay, that I am an indigenous American. Okay? Now, I've used the term Black American, like I say, to reach out to my people, because they're not going to understand when I speak to a lot of my family members, if I mention the word indigenous American, they won't even, they get mentally discombobulated. Indigenous American, what is an indigenous American? I have to explain it to them. So to bring people in, to draw people in, I use terminology that they're more aware and commonly that they can comprehend. And once I reel them in, then I can break down to them some things that they don't understand. So I call my village, my podcast, the Black Village Community Podcast, for two reasons. One reason, I want to draw in my people, those who don't know, to draw in my people, those who are not self-aware of their cultural identity. And the second reason why I use the term Black Village, to define the fact of the plurality or the multiple shades of brown that make us up as an indigenous people. I've ran too many times into too many people who are consciously indigenous aware, and they're stuck on this thing that they call copper color, that my people were copper color. Well, that's not true. The indigenous people of America were not only copper color. They were also dark brown and very dark brown to the degree of looking black. And then you have those who were just brown. And you have those who were copper color brown. which is more of a reddish brown, but not red. Don't get it twisted. There is no such thing as red Indians. So, and then you had light brown and very light. Just like we got today, who's running the reservations today. You got white Indians who call themselves Indians, but they're straight. They're white people with blue eyes and blonde hair. Then you literally got light-skinned Indians on the reservation. Those who are light brown. You can look at them. You can tell. You can see that they're part of the indigenous family. So, people, let's vertebrate the truth. Now, I got something else I want to read right here, which I took this from the Oxford Research Encyclopedia. Okay, this information I'm going to read right now is taken from the Oxford Research Encyclopedia, and this is on this is an updated information on the research in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia on the Indian slave trade, the Indian slave trade. So it goes like this. The indigenous Southeast was dominated by matrinal societies where power flowed from the kinship and social rank rather than gender. You hear that, people? Like I said, our people were a matriarchal, matrinal people, not a patriarchal. And if you brothers out there don't comprehend what I mean by that, I would encourage you to go research patriarchy and matriarchy. Again, this is what it reads. It says the indigenous Southeast was dominated by matrinal societies where power flowed from kinship and social rank rather than gender. Now let me drop down to a paragraph. Europeans' demand for bond labor created an explosive trade in Indian slaves. Between the late 15th and mid 19th centuries, colonists throughout the Americas acquired between 2 and 4 million Indian slaves. Indian slaves were everywhere in the colonial America. South Carolina plantations, New England workshops, trading houses, St. Louis shops in Montreal, Detroit households, ranches near Santa Fe. Some were exported outside of the mainland North America, including the family of the Wampanoag chief, King Philip, who were enslaved in Bermuda in the wake of his namesake war, as well as the Iroquois warriors sent to Marcellus to toil as galley slaves. The Indian slave trade boomed before Africans came to America in large numbers, and in some areas it persisted after the introduction of the African Atlantic slave trade. Now, this was taken from the Oxford Research Encyclopedia, my people. So basically, this information, now anybody who knows anything about Oxford, that's in England. This is a European encyclopedia that's dropping the truth. Again, that's dropping the truth. Let me read that last part of that paragraph one more time. Indian slave trade boomed before Africans came to the Americas in large numbers. In some areas, it persisted after the introduction of the Atlantic slave trade, meaning that even after Africans came here, Indian enslavement continued. Indigenous North American enslavement continued. It didn't stop just because they started bringing Africans here, and they didn't bring enough here. Not even 500,000 Africans were brought here. Less than that. A little bit more than 300,000 Africans were brought to North America. Any other number than that went somewhere else. It went elsewhere. It went to other places. You know, Germany had some African slaves, and the French had African slaves. The Dutch had African slaves. The Portuguese had African slaves. The Spaniards had African slaves. So, you know, Africans went everywhere. So people need to stop with this number of 1 million Africans. 2 million Africans came to America, because that's not true. Excuse me. There was no 2 million Africans that came to North America. Not even 1 million Africans came to North America. Less than 500,000. Not even 500,000. Because 500,000 is 500,000. Not even 500,000 Africans. Not even 400,000. Black folks need to wake the hell up. So, let me read this right here. I got another little article I want to read, which is called Indian Slavery and the Atlantic Slave Trade, okay? It says Southern Indians began to practice transgenerational slavery. This goes to the point where you got a lot of white folks. I'm telling you, white people just love to talk about. I call it dodge and deflect. White people love to dodge and deflect. You talk about white people being slavers and white people, their ancestors, participated in the slave trade. They're quick to say, well, Native Americans also practice slavery. Africans practice slavery. They quick to talk about that. They quickly to bring that. It's called dodge and deflect. Okay, white folks never take responsibility for nothing that they do, unless it has something to do with money. So let's check this out. It reads like this. And this is taken, as I said, from a book called Indian Slavery and Atlantic Slavery. That's what it's called. Okay. Southern Indians began to practice transgenerational slavery. This turn towards racial slavery was controversial. Some held onto older notions of captivity, using the power of kinship to transfer enslaved African Americans into family members. Mind you, again, them were not African Americans. The term African American is a new modern construct that was created between the late 70s and the early 80s. So to be using something and using a word that was oblivious to people back during the times of slavery, they didn't use that term. They didn't call slaves African Americans in the 1800s or the 1700s or the 1600s. You was called a nigger, Negro, black, or colored. So be mindful when you hear me reading these articles and they use terminology like I just read. So again, now it says that the Indians who enslaved the black Indians or their own people that were enslaved, that took in slaves, that they were making them family members. And that's because they knew they were family members. Again, let me read this. It's Southern Indians began to practice transgenerational slavery. This turn towards racial slavery was controversial. Some held on to older notions of captivity, using the power of kinship. Kinship. That means they saw them as family. To transform enslaved African Americans into family members. The adoption of racial slavery was also uneven in 1830. Slaves made up 3% of the Choctaw population, but 19% of the neighboring Chickasaw population. Okay, let me drop down on one more paragraph. During the era of Indian removal, some slaves were kidnapped by white Southerners, but most were forced to accompany their masters west on a journey to the Cherokees called Nuna Duel, the trail where we cried. Indian Territory. See, now you never hear them talk about that. The trail where we cried. You always want to hear the story that that these modern mulatto half-breed white Indians today want to talk about the Trail of Tears, and that's something that we should always be mindful of, and we should remember as well, the Trail of Tears. But they never talk about the Cherokee removal, which is called the Trail Where We Cried. Okay, in Indian Territory, slavery persisted until 1866, over a year after the conclusion of the Civil War. Did you hear that, people? Indian Territory slavery persisted until 1866. What is 1866? Between 1864 and 1865, you had what? The Emancipation Proclamation. I've said it before. When you talk about slavery, you're talking about black slavery. When you're talking about black slavery, you're talking about indigenous Native American slavery. Them were not Africans on those plantations. Them were indigenous Native Americans on those plantations. Every black face that was picking cotton, every black face that was cultivating corn, cultivating tobacco, cultivating sugar, cultivating rice, cultivating indigo. Every ranch where they call them cowboys. That's where the term cowboy came from the black slaves that took care of the cows on the ranch. Them were indigenous Native Americans, not Africans. Folks, we got to wake up. The Africans that were brought here to breed with the indigenous Native American women on the plantation to create more slaves. And not only that, most of the plantation masters refused to buy African slaves. It was hard to even sell African slaves to North America because they already had plantations and fields and ranches full of slaves already. And those slaves were indigenous Native Americans. Now, you just heard me read it right here. It said Indian Territory slavery persisted until 1866, over a year after the conclusion of the Civil War, because as sovereign nations allied with the Confederacy, Southern Indians had to sign separate treaties with the U.S. government after the emancipation. We drop down another paragraph. Despite the devastating, expansive reach of Atlantic slavery, it remained limited in scope and uneven, never fully supplanting Indian slavery. In some regions, even as the Southeast warfare reignited older slaving practices, as white settlers raided and burnt villages, taking Indian women and children captive. As late as the 1830s, during the chaos and violence of the Indian removal, some whites abducted Indians or forced them into debt bondage. Folks, we need to wake the hell up. Black folks, we need to wake up, black people. Stop calling yourself an African. You're not an African. If somebody dropped you in Africa right now, you wouldn't know where to go. The people in Africa will see you as a foreigner, not just because of your style of talking and your language, because you're not native to Africa. And if you're like me, which most black people in America are, meaning you don't know nobody in Africa, you got no relatives in Africa, ain't nobody in Africa waiting or looking for you or even waiting for a phone call, because you ain't got no family members in Africa. And that's because your family, your ancestors, are indigenous to North America. So on that note, I got one more audio that I want to play in reference to what I'm talking about. And this podcast topic is still all the same, which is Amerindian traditions and cultural connections to the Negro slave. Okay? So let me play this right quick. And this that I'm going to play, this audio cast that I'm going to play, is from an organization called the Foundation for Indigenous Americans of Anazi Heritage. Okay? Again, the Foundation for Indigenous Americans of Anazi Heritage. So check out this audio cast right here, and we shall continue before my show is over.
Now, if you read the second paragraph, and it says, in a sense, we've come to, from Dr. Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech, paragraph 4, it says, in a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence,
when the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence,
they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir.
They were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir.
This note was a promise to all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Now, anybody who has actually understood that level of history, yes, that was a promissory note to men, but it was not actually a promissory note to descendants of American Indian women. So those men were still considered 3/4 of a human being. So the question is, how come in 1963, if you look at any tape of Martin Luther King, you will see that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people were protesting for the treatment they were in their own homeland. So how come in 1963 everybody understood that Negro people were the Indians, and by 1993, 73, we now became Africans?
Wow.
Okay, so there's been a defrauding going on here. But the question we should be asking, why are we changing our name? And who's influencing us to adopt an artificial identity? Now, I understand that African word may have been a suggested political word, but to change our ethnic identity to African, where did this agenda come from? Well, the agenda actually goes back all the way to the 1890s, in which our own beloved, that many black historians call to, Frederick Douglass, made a comment about. And I tell people to refer to Frederick Douglass, The Folly of Colonialization, in which Frederick Douglass says it is a proposition to colonize the colored people of America in Africa. What does that mean? It means that they want to make the indigenous American people defraud themselves and move voluntarily into Africa. Now, what would that consist of? That means that you would come there and invade another group people's land under the ideology that you have an inherited right to a land you don't belong to. How many of us here, the DNA BS, Gates, we got DNA, he got DNA to somewhere in Africa. Oprah promoting a school in Africa, but yet she doesn't promote anything here in America. We just have to return to our nature. Now, how to do that takes education. But the Foundation for Indigenous Americans has already started to set the groundwork for all Negro descendants to register so that they can be counted as Indigenous Americans. It's not hard. It's a simple step. Anybody, especially anybody born after 1950. Because as we know, if in 1963, all of us, all our elders knew that they were Indian, the question is, why didn't they tell the generations after that what their birthright was? Even though we may not like what has become of what our ancestors left us, it's up to every generation in their truth to make it stand and make a change. But we don't have a right to deny the future generations the inheritance of life given to them because of the mistakes of our ancestors in the past. We need to take stock in who we are. Now, why haven't we taken stock? Because we haven't taken a moment as a people to understand why we are being oppressed. Oppression always goes down. But I think now that we're in the belly of the beast, it's time for us to understand our story. And the greatest legacy we have is our heritage. All black American people are the American Indians. Period. And the racial identity of all Indians is brown skin with beautiful curly hair from every level of wavy to the curliest of curl, from the lightest of cream to the bluest of black, to the broadest of nose and the fullest of lip, to the Asian iconic eyes. That is who we are. That is our ethnicity. And as you see, you look at this beautiful sister. She's 10,000 years old, found right here in America. All right? She is one of us. Think about it. I know this sister, her descendant who looks just like her, living today in Atlanta, Georgia. So it's just to show that we've been in America for thousands upon thousands of years. And our ancestors have made tremendous contributions to America. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be standing in our truth. Especially sisters, because there's a very propaganda to beat sisters and disrespect them for their right to be mothers. Why is that? And this is a form of genocide. All of these things are a form of genocide. So if anyone tells anyone that they are not indigenous, then you bring them back to Martin Luther King. Because Martin Luther King represented indigenous people on his homeland as an indigenous American man. We are not black Americans. We are indigenous Americans. And America is us.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty!
Man. Woo! Man, I love how that sister put that together. I hope you guys got it. I hope you also understood the term black. We got to stop being afraid. We got to stop walking in the same prejudicial confusion that the white devil walk in. I don't use the term black to define my ethnicity. I use the term black to define the many shades and the many colors of our people. I use the term black to reach out and to bring in those who are unaware and who are lost when it comes to their identity. Just like that sister broke down and she said that from the creamiest of the brown to the blackest of the purple and the brown, how all the different shades of the indigenous people of America, the indigenous North American Indians, come in many shades of brown. From dark brown that look to the darkest of the brown that looks black, to the brown to the copper color brown, to the light brown, to the light skin. We got to realize who we are and embrace who we are and comprehend who we are and remove the hatred and prejudice that's been handed to us through oppression of this corrupt white devil system. And so, on that note, folks, I got to go. I'm at the end of my cast. But I just had to address that. And, let me also recorrect something. I stand corrected. I said 304,000. Basically, the Africans that came to America, again, let me bring this up. And the first Africans that were brought here in 1626. From 1626 to the last African that was brought here in 1875. That number stands at 305,326. Again, not even 500,000 Africans were brought here. Not 500,000, not 400,000, 300,000. And you got to realize, how can you contrast 300,000 to the number of over 4 million indigenous people who were already enslaved here when the African got off the ship? And remember, people, in 1626, they only brought 20 Africans here. And if I stand corrected, only 17 got off the ship. I don't know what happened. I guess the other ones they took with them, probably because they couldn't sell them. I don't know. You tell me. But people, we got to be a people of peace. We got to be a people of love, and most of all, we got to be a people of truth. We got to stop emulating our oppressor, people. We got to stop emulating the enemy. And we got to be a people of truth. And so, on that note, as always, you can always join me here at the Black Village, here every Sunday, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut live here at the Black Village Community Podcast. You can always chime in at 855-445-9340. You can also chime in at 857-232-0155. And don't forget the conference key to the conference door. Sit here at the conference table of truth here with me as 947595. I will be back. I will be black as always. dropping nothing but indigenous, native, conscious truth to the community, people. And so, you know, on that note, as I always say, I love chicken. So love, peace, and chicken grease. And may the great mother bring us together under her wings of truth. And always, I love my people. I'm outie. I gotta go. See ya. I gotta go. Peace.
Aboriginal people, 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 Aboriginal people. No matter where you go in every country, we in there. Most of us did not come on slave ships, we've been here. Indian just means amalgamated more. The U.S. tried to wipe us out in 3 seminal wars. For each Aboriginal, 7 troops died. 90% of Indians were reclassified as Negroes. We fought European foes. Africa's great, but we don't look under our nose. Or now here's the Old Man River, or the Massey Sequel, knock out the Mississippi. We're the Yamasee people, and others here like the Washita, the Chocos in Colombia, Dariendas in Panama, the Garifunas and more. We're prisoners of war. Our titles, nationalities, and birthrights ignored. We got a huge missing gap in our past, and been divided into race of some type of caste. Everyone else has a language, where's mine? Cause ours is long gone like your grandpa's hairline. Aboriginal people, 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 Aboriginal people.